back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with M3.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey man, this time we're gonna do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you here on this Monday, the 29th day of January, final Monday of the month. Hope you all had a very fun, safe, healthy, happy week. Had a very safe, healthy, happy weekend, enjoying whatever it is you may have been doing over this time. It wasn't a very happy weekend for certain people out there, certain people of certain fan bases in the NFL, NBA as well, but we'll get to that as well. And this is part of being a sports fan. This is the worst part of being a sports fan, because you get your hopes up, you get so jacked up during the course of the season. And when you have those special seasons, when you have those seasons where, all right, maybe you expected to be good, maybe you expected to be highly competitive, but then as the year went on, your expectations ratcheted up because the team was better than you expected. You performed at a higher level than a lot of people predicted in the preseason. When it all comes crashing to a halt, when it all ends, and it ends without a championship, it hurts. When it ends sooner than you would like it to, with a loss, as it does for 31 other teams in the NFL, or in the NBA, 29 other teams. Same with Major League Baseball, as well as the NHL. It takes a while to get over. And in some cases, if you're a fan of a team that is used to winning, you can get over it easier. You can move on from that kind of heartbreak, from that kind of disappointment that was a season for the ages for your franchise. Now, if you're a team like the Baltimore Ravens, losing yesterday, yeah, it stings. It's going to tick you off for a while, but you got pellets on the wall. You've got championships. For teams like the Steelers, or a team like the Dallas Cowboys, if you're a fan of a certain age, you can get over those losses easier when your team has an exit in the postseason. I don't know how you get over a loss like that yesterday if you're a Detroit Lion fan. I don't know how you just turn the page and emotionally allow yourself to continue going on, continue saying, oh, we'll get it next time. Because as we've seen in sports, there's not always a next time. There's not always, oh, we'll get them tomorrow. We'll get them next year. Sometimes next year does not happen. Take, for example, me. I'm a New York Jet fan. The Jets were in back-to-back AFC championship games in 2010 and 2011. Have not been back to the postseason since then. Have had one winning season since then. Or as I said it with the New York Mets years back, when they got to the World Series in 2015. Can't think about tomorrow. You can't think about, oh, we'll get them next year, because sometimes that tomorrow doesn't happen. And that has got to be the most painful thing for a Detroit Lions fan, because it had been 30 years since you were in an NFC championship game. It's been north of 60 years since your team had reached the NFL championship back before it was known as the Super Bowl. And you looked at this, you thought it was your moment of glory. You thought it was going to top the emotion of beating the Rams wild card weekend, top the emotion of your win in the division round last week over the Buccaneers. And you had it within your grasp. You had it within one half of this being your ultimate glorious moment. You're 24-7 on the road. You're moving the ball up and down the field at will. You had 3 rushers that were running for more yards each than Christian McCaffrey. Dan Campbell, every button he was pushing was working. Every call made by Ben Johnson schematically was working. You had it all in your favor going up against this team, and it just all fell apart. You know, I haven't talked to him. I haven't seen any posts from him in the last 14 hours since this game came to an end. But I'm sure my old buddy from high school, you hear me bring up his name a lot here on this podcast every time I talk about his beloved Detroit Lions. But I'm sure my buddy Billy August, he's in a lot of emotional pain today. I'm sure this one really hit him hard, as I'm sure it hit every Detroit Lions fan. I mean, look at it. They packed up Ford Field yesterday with fans watching that game. You probably had people looking online for flight plans from Detroit to Las Vegas or wherever you may be as a Detroit Lion fan, looking at the opportunity of potentially being there in 2 weeks to watch your team in the Super Bowl. But it all fell apart. And now you're left wondering, what if, what could have happened if we had gotten there? And will we ever get back to this point? Because Dan Campbell, as positive and optimistic as he tries to be after the game, was saying he hopes it isn't the case, but what if this was their only shot? And you think about this as a Detroit Lions fan, you're never going to have this same group together at the same time again. I mean, sure, you'll make some moves in the off season. You'll attempt to reload, but remember, there's going to be changes on this coaching staff. Both your offensive coordinator and your defensive coordinator are viewed in high regard around league circles for head coaching opportunities. Ben Johnson has been viewed as the favorite to get the Commander's job. Aaron Glenn, he has been looked at by both the Commanders and the Seattle Seahawks and was in talks with other teams before their recent head coaching hirings. And you look around the NFC, the 49ers are not going anywhere. You expect teams like the Rams and the Seahawks to reload and be better next year. The Eagles and the Cowboys are still very good and have reason to be optimistic going forward. And look within your own division. This was the breakout this second half of the year for Jordan Love. He's not going anywhere. He's only going to get stronger as we go on here. So you may have missed a big opportunity here. You may have missed a big chance. You know, I think about this. I wonder what would have been easier to take. What would have been less painful? The way that things finished up last night, where you're up 24-7 at halftime and end up losing by 3 to the 49ers. Or if San Francisco actually played like the 49ers that we saw from late October through the end of the season and just went out there and kicked your ass. Which would have been a easier way to take it? Which would have been less heartbreaking? Because either way, if you're a Lions fan today, as I said, you don't have that history on your side. You probably have the worst history of any fan base in NFL history. You can throw my Jets in there, the Buffalo Bills, the Cleveland Browns, the Minnesota Vikings. If you want to throw some names in there, no one has had it worse than Detroit Lion fans. And like I said, it got off to such a promising start. You scored on 4 of your first 5 drives in the first half. Dan Campbell's making all the right decisions. He's getting wide praise for the fact that he decided to be mature about his coaching decision there. And rather than go for it, the 4th and goal there from the 3 or 4 yard line at the end of the first half, decided to just kick the field goal, go up by 3 scores and take a 17-point lead into the break. But then a lot of craziness started to happen. The 49ers started to show a little bit of life in their first drive, coming down, kicking a field goal. But the craziness was not Dan Campbell passing up on that first 4th down opportunity. And what I mean by passing up, I mean kicking the field goal there, because Josh Reynolds, even though he was falling to the ground, should have caught that pass. Jared Goff made the play that needed to be made in that spot. The craziness began to happen for the Lions on the very next drive. The craziness and the beginning of the end was when Ayuk caught that ridiculous pass off of the face mask of Valdor. We're talking about a 50-yard bomb down the field. The receiver didn't have a chance at catching this ball, but it bounces right off of Kendall Valdor's helmet and it lands in the lap of Ayuk. Never seen a play like that. Never seen something as crazy as that. And then when they scored about 2 plays later, that's when I started to get a little uneasy. That's when I started to get concerned, because even though I had picked the San Francisco 49ers to win this game, in my heart, I'm rooting for the Lions because they had kind of become America's sweetheart. They had kind of become that team that, if you didn't have a team in this postseason, or if your team got knocked off, unless it was by the Detroit Lions, you're looking at them and saying, they're an easy team to root for. Yeah, the coach is kind of crazy, but the right kind of crazy, the right kind of thing that you want to root for if you're a fan. I think his aggressiveness, and while you love a coach being aggressive, while you love a coach saying, I'm going to stick to my guns, I'm going to stick to what has worked for me all year, at some points, you've got to realize the situation of the game. You've got to realize the situation of the moment, and can't just rely on always going with what got you here. You got to rely on what is the best decision in this moment. That's why I'm never been the fan of all of this analytics stuff, all of this advanced metrics. Well, I understand there's a use for it, and I understand that it's a helpful resource. I've also said that it's not the end all be all, and you've got to judge each moment, each situation on their own merit. Base it on how the game is playing out. When he decided to pass up the second field goal attempt on a 4th down, that's when I started to look at Dan Campbell and say, what the hell are you doing? Because this game had fallen apart on the Lions. The 49er offense was getting going. Their defense was starting to make the stops that they weren't making in the first half. I mean, their defense in the first half, I had no idea what the hell the 49ers defense was thinking. They're leaving wide gaping holes down the field. They're playing for the pass when the Lions are in run formation. They look like an entire mess. They've looked like that the first half of these first two games for them in this playoffs. They look like a team that the bye was probably the worst possible thing that could happen for them. But passing up on that second field goal attempt, you look at it, your offense had completely sputtered at this point. You had a fumble by Gibbs after the touchdown by Brandon Ayuk. Then you go a 3-and-out on your next drive where Josh Reynolds had a wide open third down that he dropped that would have been a first down, would have kept the drive going, maybe would have calmed down the momentum that the 49ers had began to make. And instead, you're sitting here, it's fourth quarter, you're down by 3, you think of what the hell just happened? Kick the field goal there. Calm down the situation and get your team back on track. But instead, you got too far away from what was working in the first half. As I said, I'm all for being aggressive there, but you got to judge the situation by its merits at that given moment of time. And that given moment of time called for you kicking a field goal. Yes, I know it would have been a long field goal, would have been 50 plus yards outside at night. You look at, they got away from the run in the second half. You didn't start targeting St. Brown again until the fourth quarter after he had been tearing apart that 49ers defense. Now, it's a heartbreaking way for your season to end. I wish I could sit here today and be giving more credit to the San Francisco 49ers, because despite how awful their offense was in the first half, that's how awesome they were in the second half, especially with how keenly aware situationally Brock Purdy was. He knew when to call his own number and run the football himself, got pretty much every one of his weapons involved in the game. Hell, George Kittle didn't even have a catch until the second half, but you still felt his impact with the little he did statistically. You're seeing him out there leading blocks, leading for open space for McCaffrey and Samuel to run down the field. He's the lead guy creating havoc down the field so that his teammates could make plays. And then once you started to get the momentum there, suddenly that defense woke up and realized why they were one of the best units in the NFL this season. So I wish that could be the number one narrative. But as someone who roots for a team that is downtrodden, that doesn't have these moments every day, I feel for Detroit Lion fans today. I feel for my buddy Billy, and I hope for you guys' sake, A, at some point emotionally you get past this game, and B, you guys have your moment in the sun, because there is no fan base. And I've developed this theory through watching them this year, watching how much each one of these wins, especially the wins in the playoffs, meant to them, watching how they loaded that place up with 50,000+ people at Ford Field last night to watch the game on Jumbotrons. There is no fan base that is more deserving of a Super Bowl championship than Lions fans. You guys have been dragged through the mud. You have been laughed at, poked at, saying, oh, how cute little Lions fans. They keep showing up even despite all the heartbreak, all of the bad losses, all of the embarrassment over the years. You guys deserve your moment in the sun, and hopefully someday in the not too distant future, you get that. Today hurts, and I completely understand why. All right, gonna take a break here, come back on the other side and start discussing the AFC Championship as well as look forward to Super Bowl 58 coming up in just a couple of weeks. Also give you some thoughts today on the NBA, mix in some Major League Baseball as one free agent continues to vastly overprice himself, as well as look at the future of Bill Belichick. So plenty left to get to during the course of this podcast. Glad you guys could join me this week. And as I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, help, put your feet up if you feel like doing so, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
Now, as heartbroken as I was for Lions fans, as disappointed as I was to see them lose on Sunday night, that's how annoyed I was at the Baltimore Ravens, their choke job at home in the AFC Championship game yesterday afternoon. Because that was as big a choke job as you're going to see for a 1 seed who had everything behind them. They're at home. You have the likely league MVP in Lamar Jackson going up against a Chiefs team that, yes, they're the defending Super Bowl champions, but we have all said this from the beginning. This is the worst version of the Kansas City Chiefs during this, what we call the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid era here. This is a Chiefs team that all year long had problems offensively. All year long was dealing with overcoming wide receiver issues. Travis Kelce at times hadn't looked the healthiest. Their defense was truly carrying the way for them en route to getting the AFC, West, as well as carrying them over the hurdle to beating the Miami Dolphins and beating the Buffalo Bills. Along the way, you started to see the offense start to pick things up and their receivers, especially Valdez-Scantling, be a little bit more consistent, but they still weren't bludgeoning people like we had come to expect from the Kansas City Chiefs in the past. Along the way with this, you're watching the Baltimore Ravens completely get away from who they were all season long, because all season long, we knew they had a dominant defense. We knew they had a great ground game, but they were also a disciplined team. They weren't letting moments frustrate them. They weren't letting moments ruin who they were. And you look at the Ravens yesterday, that was a completely undisciplined performance. That was a performance that, quite frankly, John Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson, and that entire team should be embarrassed by. We know it was very chippy at the start, and a lot of that was instigated by the Kansas City Chiefs with the nonsense that Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes were creating at the beginning of the game with kicking Justin Tucker's equipment around because, he had the gall to warm up on the Chiefs side of the field. But that was the difference, or that was the side of the field that he was going to be kicking on. That was the side of the field that he wanted to prepare on. And I'm sure if you looked at the field, you look over at the Baltimore Ravens side of things, Harrison Butker was warming up and preparing on that side of the field as well. You see it all the time in pregame preparation. So it's no different. The Chiefs did their best to get under the Ravens' skin all day long, whether it be getting the unnecessary roughness penalty by Kyle Van Noy late in the second quarter. The Ravens had 2 penalties there at the end of that second quarter that let the Chiefs have that opportunity at the end of the first half to kick the field goal, to set themselves up to be up by 10 points heading into the second half, knowing that they were going to have the football, knowing that they could get the Ravens out of what had made them so successful all season long. You had the unnecessary roughness penalty by Kyle Van Noy there, where there was that little scrum inside the 2-minute warning, but it didn't look like anything bad was happening there. It looked like the refs had calmed the situation down, and Kyle Van Noy comes back in with one extra shove there because he didn't like something that Travis Kelce was saying. And even you saw the look on Travis Kelce's face. He's laughing about, saying, "Oh, got him. Yeah, I got him to lose his cool." Next play, you see the roughing the passer penalty by Jones. And normally I am one to say that they protect Patrick Mahomes way more than they ever have of any quarterback in the history of this league, even more so than some of the calls Brady was getting during his career or Brett Favre. But when you see the defender just chop the quarterback right across the face mask like that, there's really no argument to be had. There's no saying, "Oh, they got one there. They are getting all the benefit of the call." If you're the referee, you're doing an awful job if you ignore that. And even though on that drive there were 2 holding penalties by Trey Smith filling in for Joe Thuney at left guard, still they were able to get down the field enough to give Butker enough room to kick a field goal there before halftime. And you look at this, this was never more than a 10-point game. I didn't understand why the Ravens got away from running the football. Their running backs got 6 combined carries. You had Lamar Jackson dropping back and throwing the football 37 times yesterday, which has never during this season been part of his game plan. Yeah, we know he has a cannon for an arm. You saw it with that deep bomb to Zay Flowers at the end of the third quarter. And let me tell you, that play really annoyed me after the catch, the way Flowers acted. Because here you're thinking, all right, we got a 50-yard play to Flowers, gets us within the 10-yard line here. We're set up, get within 1 score. And instead, Zay Flowers is standing up, getting into it with Snee, standing over him, taunting him, and gets a 15-yard penalty thrown at him that turned out to be costly to the Ravens on that drive, because 2 plays later, you have the situation where it looks like Flowers is diving into the end zone for a touchdown, but instead Snee knocks the ball out of his arms at about the 1-yard line. Chiefs recover, and the Ravens really never got going offensively there because of a lot of stupidity on their part. Whether it be after that Flowers cutting his hand open because he's frustrated over on the bench, or Lamar Jackson trying to be Superman with 6 minutes to go when he's got guys underneath wide open. He's instead throwing into triple coverage in the end zone and throws a pass to Likely that's picked off by Bush. It was just an all-around disgusting performance by the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm not just saying this because I was rooting for the Ravens, that I wanted them to win this game. I'm saying this because, you watch this team most of the year. They had built a certain remedy on how to win games. They had built a certain way that had made them special, that had made them Super Bowl contenders, that had made Lamar Jackson the league MVP this season, and got away from all that. Plus, you're at home. Your defense gave up 17 points to Patrick Mahomes in the first half, but shut Mahomes and company down in the second half, and still you only managed to score 10 points. It was a disgusting display by the Ravens, but at the same time, you got to give the Kansas City Chiefs a lot of credit. You got to give them a lot of props here. As much as they annoyed the living crap out of me, as much as whole story with the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce stuff bothers the crap out of me all the time. And it's reasons why, and I bring this friend of mine up here a lot. It's reasons why I tell my dear friend and CSB legend, up and coming actress, the great Katie Walsh. I've told her before, I will always be supportive and be one of the biggest fans of your acting career, but I will never watch if you do something for the Hallmark movie channel, because that kind of stuff annoys the living hell out of me. But even Hallmark, hell, even the WWE could not script this kind of year that the Kansas City Chiefs have had. And I am truly begging the San Francisco 49ers to please win in 2 weeks. Please do not come sleepwalking into the game like you did against the Packers, like you did yesterday against the Lions, because this Chiefs team, it's a different animal. Yes, we've said it's the worst iteration of the Chiefs in the Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid era. But do you realize what they're going for? You realize the motivation that is behind them? They are chasing down history. They are chasing down putting the icing on the cake of a dynasty here, going to their 4th Super Bowl in the last 5 years, attempting to win their 3rd championship with Patrick Mahomes. This will further cement the argument or the continuation toward the journey for Patrick Mahomes of being the greatest of all time. When you think about it, he's only 28 years old. 28, and he's going to his 4th Super Bowl. A chance to win 3 championships before he's 30, and we're barely halfway through this guy's career. He's doing things that no one else has ever done, that doing it at a level no one else has ever done it, because he makes the simple look easy and the extraordinary just look like another day at the park. Plays that other quarterbacks have a tough time making, he sits back there and laughs at, and it's like, yeah, that's just something we were working on the other day. It's absolutely, despite all of the obnoxiousness that comes from this team, with Chris Jones talking trash to fans before games, how Patrick Mahomes was whining, complaining to Josh Allen about that call at the end of the game back in November, or how publicized Travis Kelce's relationship with Taylor Swift has become, and how them and the NFL are praying for their Hallmark ending moment. There's no denying the greatness on display here by Patrick Mahomes. No denying that we're witnessing one of the greatest careers in the history of sports. While it's annoying to watch right now, I hope not just Chief fans, but fans of sports everywhere can sit back and really appreciate that kind of greatness. Dynasties aren't always considered the most popular thing, but what he's doing at the level he's doing it is something we've never seen before. His talents far exceed the level of Tom Brady. And Tom Brady was great, but he didn't have the arm strength and the athleticism that Patrick Mahomes has. And Patrick Mahomes, while we scoffed at it at one point, may just chase him down, may just grab that role of the GOAT from him at some point. And it's going to be a fun conversation. I said it last week. I'll say it again. This generation and my generation are going to have an interesting conversation in about 20 years. The same as we've had these last 20 plus years of Michael versus LeBron. That next argument is going to be Brady versus Mahomes. And I don't know if there's going to be a clear-cut winner with that one when it's all said and done.
I'll be back.
Now, I'm starting to wonder if there is something special in the water in the NBA right now. And that's not to say that, these guys are doing anything illegal. Let's be clear about that. But the scoring spree that has gone on in the league in the last week is just insane. I don't know if there's been some kind of motivation based on last week was the 18-year anniversary of Kobe Bryant's 81-point game. And then on Friday was the 4-year anniversary of his tragic passing, him, his daughter Gigi, and not 7 other people in that horrific helicopter accident back in 2020, whether they were all trying to pay tribute to him or it was just a weird coincidence. But you had 4 players in the span of 5 days go for 60 plus. And in each occurrence, you had it be 2 in each night. Last Monday, Joel Embiid put up 70 in a win against the Spurs. Karl Anthony Towns later that night put up 62 in the T-Wolves loss to the Hornets, although you saw the immaturity of the Minnesota Timberwolves there as their players are checking in with assistant coaches throughout the game to get updates on Joel Embiid because they had heard the big first half he got off to and wanted Towns after he put up 22 in both the first and second quarter to try to top that. It became too much of point chasing, too much of, hey, let's try to have some kind of historic night here with Towns. He faded down the stretch. That team collapsed in the fourth quarter. You had their coach, Chris Finch, pissed off at them during the post-game press conference saying it was a disgusting performance of defense and immature basketball with how they were just point chasing and blowing a double-digit fourth quarter lead to one of, if not the worst team in the NBA, the Charlotte Hornets. But, you know, to see these performances, then you mix it in with the performances by Luka and Booker on Friday night. Devin Booker putting up 62 in a tough loss to the Pacers. The Phoenix Suns don't look now, people, but are playing some pretty good basketball. Have won 12 of their last 15 games and moved up to 6th in the West. And then Luka putting up 41 in the first half, scoring 73 on the night, becoming the 4th highest scoring game in the NBA history. It's kind of a weird occurrence, as I said, but it's also showing as much as people will want to complain, oh, there's not enough defense played in today's game. We also are in the midst of an era where we're watching the best athletes ever to play the game collectively. I mean, yeah, you have greats like Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain. The list goes on from the pre-2000s. But never has the athleticism, never has the speed of the game, never has the strength of these players been at a higher display than what we're watching today. I mean, I'm all for defense, but I also don't want to sit there and watch a 81-78 game that's a slog, that's a snooze fest where you're watching guys miss shots left and right. I don't want to sit there and watch the All-Star game each and every single night where you're seeing little to no defense being played. But these displays that we're seeing, I mean, you think about it, from 1985 to 2004, we had a combined 8 60-point games. In the last 9 months, there have been 9 60-point games. The 4 that we mentioned last week, you mix in Giannis, you mix in Dame, you mix in the Spider getting one in there in Donovan Mitchell. I mean, what these guys are doing is just absolutely incredible. It's something that we should be celebrating as long as your team wins the game, unlike what Karl Anthony Towns and those immature kids with the T-Wolves did. But it's been very fun to watch. Now, as I said, I'm all for good defense being played in a game because defense is part of the key to winning a championship. That's why, those Warrior teams from about 15 years ago, like that team that upset Dirk and the Mavericks, the year Dirk won league MVP and they finished first overall in the West, shocking the world as a team that just snuck into the postseason as an 8 seed, but were able to unseed this top team in the league that year. They were a cute, fun story, but you knew in the end at some point it was going to catch up to them because at some point they weren't going to make all of their shots. They were going to need some help defensively. And that's probably the mindset here that the Milwaukee Bucks were under last week when they surprised everybody by firing Adrian Griffin in his first year as the head coach, just 43 games into the season at a time where the Milwaukee Bucks are at second place in the Eastern Conference. Now, who knows? There is some rumblings there that maybe Dame and Giannis lost their patience with him. There were some rumblings that Adrian Griffin didn't like having Giannis's brother on the team, and maybe that's why Giannis went to management. Or maybe management saw that, oh, damn, this team is playing even worse defense than they had played the last couple of years under Mike Budenholzer, because that seemed to be the big reason on why Budenholzer got axed last year. Not just them going down in the postseason, but their defense taking a turn for the worse as compared to the way it was the first couple of years, including the year that they won the championship. I don't want to cry conspiracy theory here, because even though I'm always down for a good conspiracy theory, even though I'm always of the mindset that things aren't always as they appear, and maybe you do have to look at something with a squinted eye at certain points, it comes across as very fishy that within 6 hours of this firing, they hired Doc Rivers as their head coach. Because Doc Rivers, while many people know, after he got axed by the 76ers at the end of last year, he joined ESPN and was working for them as a game analyst with Mike Breen and Doris Burke. They were the A team for the NBA on ESPN. But what many people don't know is he was kind of a consultant for the Milwaukee Bucks in the weeks that they were playing in the in-season tournament. So he was kind of giving them advice along the way here. It wouldn't surprise me if Doc Rivers was, if you looked at security cameras, was essentially hanging out in the parking garage of the Milwaukee Bucks facility that morning. And more or less that 6 hours in between Adrian Griffin's firing and I believe it was CNN of all people, of all places, the first to report this hiring, that that 6 hours was just the negotiation time to get his contract done. But if you're Doc Rivers, even though you've got a championship on your resume, you've got to look at this as the final straw for you. You've got to look at this as pretty much it could be your last chance because A, you're not getting any younger, and B, you've got on your resume at least 3 times where you have blown 3-1 leads in the postseason. Hell, that championship with the Boston Celtics, while you guys celebrate it, glorify it like it's some kind of big dynasty, that was a long time ago. That was 2008. That was 16 years ago. And since then, you've blown 3 separate 3-1 leads in the postseason with 3 different franchises. If you don't get it done with this Bucks team, with Giannis in his prime, with Dame Lillard still somewhat in his prime, people are going to start raising an eye toward you and saying, were you really that great a coach? Or were you just presented with one of the greatest situations in NBA history with Garnett, Pierce, and Allen? So you got to get it done. It's been a long time since you've done anything big time in the NBA postseason. It's been a long time since you've been to an NBA finals, almost 15 years since you've done that when you lost game 7 to Kobe and the Lakers in the 2010 NBA finals. It's almost a now or never situation for Doc Rivers. At some point in the next 2 years, you got to get it done with this group, or you may be done as an NBA coach as we know it. Now we are 10 days away from the NBA trade deadline. And even though I had been saying, and many people have been saying for weeks, that there's got to be another move coming for the New York Knicks after the Anunoby trade. They've been playing some great basketball. You look at them since that trade, they are 12-2. Anunoby has been every bit of the defensive presence you can ask for. He set a team record for most consecutive games of a positive plus minus since joining the Knicks, breaking the record that was previously held surprisingly by J.R. Smith. And there was just a positive flow, positive vibe with this team, even despite the injury to Mitchell Robinson, where you're looking at them each and every single night and like, damn, they're fun to watch. They are a fun, enjoyable team that was taking care of business on the road, was winning big games at home. Hell, the last week they beat the 2 teams that were in the NBA finals last year, the Nuggets and the Heat, and they beat the crap out of the Denver Nuggets. I don't want to hear about the fact that it was the end of a 5-game road trip for the Denver Nuggets and that they played multiple games last week. That was, you could say it was a no-show by them, or you look at it the way I look at it and say that the Knicks went out there with something to prove. They went out there after finding out that Jalen Brunson was not going to be a starter in the NBA All-Star game, which I'm not going to make too big of a deal out of because I think he'll still make it into the game, and not as an injury replacement, but as someone that truly made the team. The problem is just the Knicks don't promote their players as much as, some of these smaller markets do when it comes to putting out there and publicizing vote for these guys for the All-Star game. But this Knicks team had a flow to it, had a vibe to it. You were having a lot of fun watching this team. And now it feels like a piece of that is being taken away from you because you got as big a scare as you possibly could have on Saturday afternoon. I mean, you're having a party there at Madison Square Garden on Saturday, beating up on your longtime rival, the Miami Heat, when late in that game, in the final couple of minutes, Julius Randle tumbles over Jaime Jock Jr. and has to leave the game. What we would find out is a dislocated right shoulder. Now, the x-rays didn't show much damage, and the MRIs that have been coming back in the last several hours are a positive sign for the Knicks. As of right now, it looks like they have avoided the worst possible situation, and as both Ian Begley and Woj have reported, it doesn't look like he's going to need surgery, which would potentially cost him the rest of the season. It more so looks like it's a situation where he's going to miss several weeks rather than several months. And that's the best thing you could have if you're a Knicks fan. But it does put a damper on things, because now it's going to start to stretch this roster. We knew that Tom Thibodeau played a very thin rotation as it was, usually 9 guys at the most. But now you're going to be taking a bench and starting lineup, kind of adjusting some things here. Whereas Josh Hart had finally started to regain some rhythm, really regain some flow in his role. Now you're going to be taking him from the bench and putting him in the starting lineup. And there was already questions about the bench as it was after the trade for Anunoby and losing Emmanuel quickly. That was something that them and Knicks fans everywhere were looking at as something they needed to upgrade going into the trade deadline next week. And now taking your best bench player and putting it in the lineup even more so makes that a need. More so makes that something you got to look for in the next 10 days. Plus, Randall was playing some of the best basketball of his career. As much as we get on him at times over the last couple of years for how he acts like a baby and how nervous he still made some Knicks fans with how much he dribbles the basketball, you could see a real growing up with this guy in the last year, a maturing starting to happen, not just physically as far as how he was playing on the court, but emotionally, how he was handling things not going his way, how he was handling if he was having an off shooting night, realizing that, hey, you know what? I'm not going to shoot us out of this game. I'm not making my shots. I'm going to be the provider for my teammates. And when I'm not on the court, be the best possible cheerleader I can be. That's improvement and growth from Randall that we had not seen in recent years. Just starts to really put a hindrance into this team's vibe, into this team's emotional lift that they had, now losing this guy for a significant chunk of time. And you hope that he can come back, by the end of February, so that he can start to get into a rhythm as you get closer to the playoffs, and this team can continue to gel, can continue to, at worst tread water and not lose this top 4 spot. But this is just another reason why, if you're a Knicks fan, you got to feel like there's a dark cloud hanging over you, and you sit there wondering sometimes, hey, why can't we have nice things?
I'll be back.
I'm all for someone trying to get the most money that they possibly can, but trying to strike while the iron's hot. Hell, all the time when I see free agents leave their respective teams for bigger money deals, especially teams that I root for, I never fault them for that. I never say, oh, that's a bad job by the player. I look at it and say, hey, they got one chance at this career. They've got one chance at having this kind of life. Go get as big a bag as you possibly can. You are worth what someone's willing to pay you. But at sometimes you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and realize what you're truly worth and not, be so foolish into thinking you're worth something you're not. And that is the situation I think we're falling into right now when it comes to probably the top remaining pitcher on the free agent market in Major League Baseball. I don't know what Scott Boras is telling Blake Snell, but clearly they are both out of their freaking minds, because there has been only one team that has made offers to Blake Snell this offseason, and that being the New York Yankees. The Yankees made Blake Snell about a month ago an offer of 6 years for $150 million. And Blake Snell turned that down because he is looking, get this is hilarious, for 9 years at $270 million. Blake Snell, we are 2 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. If you would like to join everybody else in the Major League Baseball season for 2024, wake the hell up. You are out of your damn mind if you think you are getting a 9-year contract worth $30 million per season. Yes, you've won 2 Cy Young Awards in 2018 and 2023. But those are the only 2 years of your 8-year career so far where you were really great, where you were a top level pitcher. Those are the only 2 seasons of your career in which you made 30 or more starts in a season, as well as had an ERA under 3. Every other year of his career, he made 27 starts or less, while he's had other seasons of an ERA in the 3s. 2016, he had an ERA of 3.54 in 19 starts. That was his rookie year, so it's a solid rookie year. In 2020, he made 11 starts with an ERA of 3.24. That was the pandemic season, so no one's making 30 starts that season. And then in 2022, he missed time due to an injury, only made 24 starts at an ERA of 3.38. So as you can see, he's a quality pitcher, but he's not, top of the line guy. He's had 2 big time years and the rest of it average. All right, maybe slightly better than average. But he hasn't been, Garrett Cole or Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander or Jacob deGrom or any of those top guys that are going to, in all likelihood, wind up in the Hall of Fame, because he's a snooze fest to watch as a pitcher, walks a ton of batters each and every season. It's a struggle for him to get through 6 innings a start. That's usually the max that he makes any given year. This is, not a guy that you should be going out there and spending big time money on, handing over your franchise to. And at some point, him and Scott Boras are going to need to wake up and realize that. Now we're starting to see it narrow down in the NFL coaching carousel. A time where we had, 7 or 8 openings has now dwindled down to just 2. Where in the last week, we've seen the Panthers hire Buccaneers offensive coordinator Dave Canales to be their new head coach. He's now got the difficult task of trying to redevelop Bryce Young and help him overcome what was a miserable rookie season, not just with them going 2-14, but his numbers were nothing to write home about, had almost as many interceptions as touchdowns, but you hope, being such a young guy and now having an offensive coach, he can start to turn things around, because the only quarterback that he had a better QBR better than last season was Zach Wilson. And that's not a conversation you want to be in. The Titans hired Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan to be their next head coach. And here's a guy that has worked his way up through the rankings and has worked with some really good quarterbacks over his career. Was just getting started as a coach when Peyton Manning led the Denver Broncos to the Super Bowl back in 2015. Then was on the staff with the Detroit Lions in 2016 and 2017 when Matthew Stafford posted consecutive 4,000 plus yard seasons, as well as was with the Raiders in 2018 when Derek Carr posted over 4,000 yards. And then look at it this year. He was able to help keep the Bengals competitive throughout the season, him and Zach Taylor, at a time where Joe Burrow was battling through injuries before he suffered that season-ending finger injury. And even with Jake Browning as their quarterback, kept them in the playoff race into December. So gotta give him some credit there. Now he's got a big goal on his hands where he's got to figure out, can Will Levis play quarterback? Or do they need to go draft another guy or sign someone in free agency? I would think by end of October, he needs to know the answer on that, because you can't keep running it back, wasting years on your career trying to figure out if a project like Will Levis can actually play or not. The biggest known secret of the entire offseason, I think, was the fact that the Chargers were going to hire Jim Harbaugh. And we knew he was going to leave in Michigan, unlike previous coaches who have either left a school for another school or left for the NFL. The Michigan fan base was just so grateful and wishing him well moving forward. But he goes into probably the best possible spot for any of these coaches, because he goes to a team that not only already has weapons, that not only has players to work with there, would it be, Keenan Allen, would it be Mike Williams if he can ever stay healthy? But you've got one of the best young quarterbacks in this league in Justin Herbert, who, despite some of the records that he set the first couple of years of his career, you could argue has somewhat underachieved based on the fact that he's made the postseason one time so far in his young career. But look at it. He's had nothing but defensive coaches so far. And now he finally gets a coach that, while yes, he's going to be very CEO-like over the organization, is someone that is going to help mold this great young offensive talent. But I think what the surprise here is once the Falcons hired Raheem Morris, and this is not a knock on Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris has done a great job rebuilding his reputation after a struggling start to his career as a coach when he was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach. He was still very young at that time, and not everybody can be Sean McVay taking on a head coaching spot in their late 20s, early 30s. He was able to go back as a coordinator, rebuild his reputation, worked both on the offensive and defensive coaching staffs over these last 12 years, and is now getting a second opportunity with the Atlanta Falcons, going to a team where, just like the Chargers, the cover is not bare there. You've got great weapons there like Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts, amongst others, Jonnu Smith. Guys that once you figure out the quarterback spot, whether it's you sign someone in free agency or you use that 8th pick in the draft on someone like Kyle Pitts, or if someone else were to fall on you at that spot, or you trade up and are able to get a Drake May or get another quarterback of your choosing. You're obviously not going to get Caleb Williams. Say you're able to trade up and get Jaden Daniels. Once you get the quarterback, you've got the weapons where you can win rather quickly and are in the right division to do so. But with all of these hirings, with all of these jobs being filled, and based on what we've heard on what the Commanders and Seahawks are looking at when it comes to possible candidates, with the Commanders looking at Ben Johnson as the projected favorite to be their next head coach, with the Seahawks and Commanders both having interest in Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn, and the Seahawks also being heavily interested in Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. Could we go through this entire coaching cycle without either Mike Vrabel or Bill Belichick getting a job? And Mike Vrabel, all along, I could see him possibly sitting out for a year, maybe going working television in the same route that Sean Payton had done in 2022. But in the case of Bill Belichick, whereas Mike Vrabel's still a rather young guy, still got many years ahead of him to coach, Bill Belichick is 72 years old. While he may act like a very young guy in his non-grouchy moments, he's not getting any younger. He's not going to be someone that if you hire him as your head coach, you know that he's going to be there forever. It's a short-term thing that you're hoping to win rather quickly, where he's there, 5 years, something around that, and you hope in that time span you can turn around and win a championship with him. So if he were to sit out a year, that just further pushes him away from potentially getting another head coaching opportunity. Even though he's the greatest of all time, and while people will never publicly admit it, will never go this route because it's illegal to do so, they're going to look at his age at some point and say, oh, maybe is it passing him by? Maybe is he too old to be an NFL head coach? I think part of the problem is that he not only wants to be the head coach, he wants to be the head of the organization. He wants to run things. And that's part of the reason why he didn't get the Falcons job, because the people there were so concerned with their job security that they started getting in Arthur Blank's ear, and he veered away from that, decided to go with a head coach that wasn't going to demand controlling the roster, demand controlling the day-to-day operations of roster construction, and wouldn't have a seat higher than the general manager. And I've never believed this theory for 1 second that Belichick would accept a lesser role, like becoming the new defensive coordinator of the New York Giants, because the second that the Giants have back-to-back losses, there's going to be the fans that are begging for Bill to coach the team instead of Brian Daboll, and he would never do that, be looking over the shoulder of one of his disciples like that. But it is going to create an interesting dynamic that is going to loom over the 2024 NFL season. If Bill Belichick is not a head coach at the start of next year, is still out there as a free agent, you look at some of these teams, whether it be the Dallas Cowboys, whether it be the two teams that play at MetLife Stadium, the Jets and the Giants, or anybody that has a good quarterback but has a down disappointing kind of season. There's going to be that cloud that hangs over that team, that looms over that team of, the potential option of Bill Belichick being their head coach and guiding that team to a championship. A dynamic that's going to be very interesting to see, in that I never thought we'd see the day where a coach that is not coaching a team is still such a big storyline heading into a season. But that's the legacy, and that is the reputation, well-earned reputation, that Bill Belichick has built up. Can you just imagine? Because I think both of the head coaches in this area, Saleh more so than Daboll, are on thin ice heading into next year. If the Jets or Giants get off to bad starts, you're going to start hearing the rumblings. You're going to start hearing the chants at MetLife Stadium for Bill Belichick. And that is something that I never thought I would see or hear as a possible potential option. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Monday, January 29th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. Hell, we only got one life, people, so you might as well live it up. And I'll talk to you all same time next week. But until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody. I have had enough of you. Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to smell you. Now leave. I'll be back.